Out of all the niches on Roblox, the most popular is probably ASIM games, by far. It seems every month there's a new smash hit ASIM game that comes out that everyone will glaze like it's the second coming of Jesus. But, you know, I do get the craze. I have, after all, played Dead by Daylight since 2017. I was 9 years old. God damn, I'm old. Since then, the genre on Roblox has really taken off. Pillar Chase 2, Bear Alpha, Stop It Slender, and newer games such as Forsaken. But honestly, every time I see a new ASIM announced or released, it always follows one of three basic categories, and these three categories are the focus of today's video. I want to list all the inherent pros and cons of these types of games and their general mechanics to maybe help those who are making ASIMs later down the line, to see what type of mechanics would fit the vision they're going for, or, you know, just provide a video for you to watch while you're eating that 5th slice of pizza in a row. Yeah, I see you. As always, these are not every ASIM, but it's the vast majority. Don't go onto my comments saying, oh, generic ASIM number 46 is different because it has one slight mechanic difference. Anyway, if you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Subscribe and join my community Discord, and let's not waste any more time and hop into the video. Now, some bases out of the way. Obviously, all ASIMs have a killer side and a survivor side. Though, honestly, that's where a lot of the similarities end. I mean, just take a look at Forsaken versus Outcome Memories. They don't play similar at all. One is much more team-focused, relying on very specific characters to have a successful team, while the other has a huge emphasis on individual skill and stamina management, where you could theoretically survive much easier as a team of supports, because no one is hindered in their ability to run loops. Of course, these categories will be larger strokes, and I will point out differences when I see them, but generally they all fall under one of these big, broad strokes. The modern ASIM format is often attributed to Forsaken, but the seeds of it started probably back in like Pillar Chase 2. This is your most common type of ASIM game. You can find these about a dime a dozen on the Roblox homepage. Generally, these are the pretty simple ones to understand. You have a killer, 100 stamina, sometimes more as the killer, and 2 abilities as survivor. The main objective is to survive, but there are often generators around that make surviving easier because it makes the time take less for the round to end. There are a lot of pros to games like this. They're simple to understand, having ease of access and accessibility to draw newer players in and keep them hooked for longer because it typically ends up being less frustrating than having to learn every little detail of the game. You can just kind of hop in and have a good time. Plus, with a generally pretty empty slate outside of everyone having base kit stamina, there's a lot that you can do with survivor and killer abilities. Not only this, but it also gives you the tools to improve at the game and feel like you're actually doing something because of stamina mechanics. Now, some of you may say that I don't like stamina, and honestly I wouldn't blame you if you see some of my videos, but that's not necessarily the case. While it is true that they generally, in my opinion, add nothing to the game outside of being a band-aid fix to balance, it can be done properly. Having stamina helps games like this because it adds in a sense of skill that can be felt fairly fast if you learn how to conserve mana and chase, which also helps player retention in the long run. But while these are honestly a lot of positives, there's a lot of negatives too. One of the biggest that stand out is that these games are typically centered around single chases. So if you get a team that, you know, works like a team, then it becomes a near unwinnable situation in a lot of games. Add on to the fact that nearly every survivor is self-sufficient because, well, stamina and loops, good lobbies ramp up in unfairness very fast. They're also usually typically pretty lazy in their design too. Like, graphics and VFX aside, a lot of these games just end up being a hold W simulator, while other people just don't get to do much because these games are typically centered around single chases at a time, especially if they're a survivalist type character. Another big one is the fact that oftentimes the objectives just go by really fast, especially if there's a lot of people. A lot of killers don't have the ability or just aren't incentivized to patrol generators. That's also a big issue now that I bring it up. Generators are almost always the objective in these games, which just ends up feeling lazy at times. Don't get me wrong, they're better than things coming up, but they can still be pretty boring still. Overall, it's not a bad thing to make a game like this. In my opinion, they're pretty inconsequential, fun yet forgettable. A game type that's like sour candy. It's fun and good in short bursts, but play them too often and it starts to hurt your mouth. Or in this case, for the games, it just gets boring. They're probably best experienced in short bursts, like, you know, a few matches a day. Overall, I give this type of ASIM a B-. These are much different from the previous ASIM type. Instead of focusing on individual looping and skill, these promote teamwork, and a lot of it. And because in this game, the killers are strong enough to feasibly rip you to shreds if you stray too far very fast. There are no objectives, and you have to survive the full timer until the exit spawns so that you may leave. To compensate for this new strength in killer, the survivors are also strong, and even have a second life, barring a few exceptions. So why would you play these? Well, there's a lot of positives. With a game like this, the survivor strength and variety are often quite high, and much more fun to play as a good team because the killer still feels like a threat, and can still kill you if you make a mistake. So it prevents these games from getting stale very fast because you're reliant on your team to keep you alive, with the only exceptions really being survivalists. Given the killers are strong too, you're often given other types of mobility, a whole third dimension to wander through, which allows for abilities like flight, which is notably not really present in other subgenres. It leads to an interesting dynamic where you're not just surviving, but you're fighting back. Because there are no objectives, the only real thing to do is teamwork, and that leads to a constant action because you're always covering one's mistakes. You're always near the killer in some way. Conversely, if you're the killer, that makes the game more fun too because you're incentivized to not just finish one chase. It's more crowd control, it's a lot more macro play. Though this genre has some downsides as well, like a lot of downsides, probably the most downsides out of any subgenre. While I would argue that this has the capability to be the most fun subgenre on this list, I think it also has the potential to be the most frustrating on both sides. Because the killer is so strong, unless it's a last man standing, generally it can become very punishing very fast, which really isn't that beginner friendly, which is fine, I actually prefer it that way, but it can lead to people being turned off from the game because they left their team, died, and decided it wasn't fun. It certainly takes more to get into these types, I will say. Since survivors are often much stronger, they're also very punishing for killer too, simply because one mistake and you're stunned and set back a large amount of progress, be it a killer or just distance that you can't make up very fast since these typically don't have stamina. It's uniquely frustrating for both sides that can't really be found anywhere else. Plus, because of how team-centric these are, if you end up having dead weight, it ends up killing your whole entire team. They're the games that have the most replay value in my opinion, because no round is ever going to feel exactly the same since it just isn't on you. It's also heavily reliant on anyone else around you as well. So while they do have the most replay value, a good portion of it will end up with you dead with not much you could have done because your team was less than stellar. But they tend to have a lot more substance, if that makes sense. Instead of it being like sour candy, it's more like a pie. There's different types and they all have the potential to be really good, but substitute one ingredient and the crust just ends up not forming well because you added water instead of eggs. One wrong thing can ruin your entire experience of the game. A true B+ experience. I don't have any better eloquent way to put it, so I'm just gonna call it the Dead by Daylight clones, and they're the final subgenre on this list. These are the games that try to copy the Dead by Daylight formula. Out of all of these, they're absolutely the most formulaic. They typically require you to get rid of 5 generators to open the doors and escape. This is the whole objective and what the games are balanced around, so to compensate, killers are better at patrolling them, and it takes much longer to complete. But the survivors are not helpless either. They have disposable map resources to be able to waste time, or save themselves from being put into a state that they can't really escape without help, and if they're put there 3 times, then they die completely. Now, these are honestly the hardest to get into, in my opinion. Since they copy Dead by Daylight a lot of the time and a lot of the systems of DBD, they are really grindy and complicated at times. Learning the counterplay to killers, perks, items, good looping spots, good maps, all of that, which is just a huge turnoff for a lot of potential people who might want to learn the game but simply can't because they don't have the time or just don't want to invest a lot of hours into learning a Roblox game, which completely fair. But they do have some positives. They are typically the most balanced. At least the Roblox ones, not DBD itself, dear Jesus Christ. Generally, there just isn't a lot of BS in these versions of ASIMs, but there is still some. It's generally reserved for much more competitive lobbies, but generally they can be pretty fun once you do get past the original entry level, which is a lot higher than most other ASIMs. The killers are all also made with counterplay in mind, meaning that they can kind of get wild with their abilities, but are also generally pretty fair because their counterplays are built into the kit. There's a lot more match variety with the perks you can bring. Overall, it tends to just end up being really good for replayability. However, there are also a lot of downsides to offset these good sides. Probably the most in these ASIMs, honestly, because for one, the gameplay is very formulaic. Even with match variety, it can just get boring very quickly, especially since most people just end up AFKing on generators, since this is the main and most important objective, and chases feel second to doing this, and chases are the most fun part of the game. Playing killer can be equally boring if your survivor is really good at looping, because then you just waste a lot of time. It just ends up being unfun. Because of the gameplay loop, maps can become very arbitrary and formulaic, since they have to be balanced around window vaults and pallets, which can make every map feel samey. A lot of these games are fundamentally flawed, because they just end up taking heavy inspiration from a passion project from 2016 that just wasn't supposed to blow up like it did. While the other two were good, this subgenre just ends up being like no fat milk. It's watery, but you can still see why people might enjoy it because of what little flavor there is left. If singled out, it can be enjoyable, but like looking at the rest, like the big picture, it just falls apart. Which is why it gets the lowest ranking in this video, which is a C. There aren't really many ASIMs that don't fall under these categories anymore, at least ones that are popular. I'm sure I missed some that are like absolute gems, diamonds in the rough, but just like no one plays them, so you never get into a match or just never get it on the Roblox homepage or something. But, you know, when you think of an ASIM, you typically think of one of these types of games. Your Forsakens, your Disasters, and your Violence Districts. None of these subgenres are inherently bad. They offer different things that different people might enjoy. One stamina management, one teamwork, and one predictability. And honestly, just like what you like. I do hope that this helps give a certain look into why some of these games are designed the way they are, and how it might affect things in the future, because if you see any ASIM that's coming out, it's probably going to follow one of these three types. So with that, this video concludes. If you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Subscribe and join my community Discord, and I thank you for watching my video. Bye bye, guys.